The first time Nelson saw her, she was standing in the middle of a muddy market, holding a broken wooden wheelbarrow filled with vegetables. Her dress was old, her hands were dirty, her sandals were torn, and yet, there was something about her eyes that he could not understand. She looked like someone who had lost everything. But the truth was, she owned everything. Keisha was the only daughter of one of the richest businessmen in the country. She had grown up surrounded by luxury, private drivers, expensive clothes, and people who smiled whenever they saw her. But after her father's death, Keisha discovered something that broke her heart. Almost everyone around her loved her father's money. Not her. One evening, while sitting alone in her father's enormous house, Keisha opened an old letter he had left for her. The letter contained only one sentence. If you ever want to know whether someone truly loves you, let them meet you when you have nothing to give. Those words changed her life. Keisha made a decision. She would leave her mansion. She would hide her identity. And she would live like an ordinary poor woman. She traveled to a small remote community where nobody knew her family name. There, she rented a tiny room and started selling vegetables and cooked food from a small wooden stall. For the first few days, life was difficult. People ignored her. Some laughed at her. Others complained that her food was too cheap. But Keisha didn't care. She had come there for one reason: to discover if real love still existed. Then she met Nelson. Nelson was a young graduate who had been unable to find a job. Every morning, he walked through the market carrying a worn-out folder filled with his certificates. Every evening, he returned home disappointed. But despite his struggles, Nelson always smiled. One afternoon, Keisha noticed him standing near her stall. He stared at the food but didn't buy anything. "Are you hungry?" Keisha asked. Nelson smiled awkwardly. "Very." "Then why aren't you eating?" He lowered his eyes. "I don't have enough money." Keisha quietly placed a plate of food in front of him. "Eat." Nelson looked shocked. "But I can't pay." "Then pay me tomorrow." He smiled. "I promise." The next morning, Nelson returned. But instead of paying her with money, he brought a small bag of rice. "I couldn't find work," he said. "But my mother had some rice. She told me to give you this." Keisha stared at the bag. It was worth almost nothing. But to her, it was priceless. Because for the first time, someone had given her something without asking for anything in return. Days turned into weeks. Nelson began helping Keisha at the stall. He repaired the broken wheelbarrow. He carried heavy boxes. He protected her from rude customers. And whenever she looked tired, he quietly brought her water. One evening, rain began falling heavily. The market became empty. Keisha struggled to pull her stall toward shelter. Suddenly, Nelson appeared. "Leave it," he shouted. "I'll do it." He pushed the heavy cart through the rain while Keisha followed behind him. When they finally reached safety, Nelson was completely soaked. Keisha looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Why do you always help me?" Nelson smiled. "Because you help me when you have nothing to gain." Keisha froze. Those words reminded her of her father's letter. She began falling in love with Nelson. But she was terrified, because she knew the truth would eventually come out. Then one day, Nelson finally confessed his feelings. "I know you don't have much," Keisha said nervously. Nelson laughed softly. "Neither do I. I'm not beautiful like rich women. I don't care. I'm poor. So am I." Keisha looked into his eyes. "What if one day you discover I'm not the person you think I am?" Nelson smiled. "Then I'll get to know that person too." Keisha couldn't hold back her tears. But before she could answer, a black luxury car suddenly stopped outside the market. Two men stepped out. They walked directly toward Keisha. "Miss Keisha." The entire market went silent. Nelson looked confused. The men bowed respectfully. "Your family has been searching for you for months." Keisha closed her eyes. Her secret was over. Nelson slowly turned toward her. "What did he just call you?" Keisha couldn't speak. One of the men opened the car door. "Your father's company is waiting for you. You are now the sole owner of everything he left behind." Nelson's face changed. He looked at her old dress, the small food stall, the broken wheelbarrow. Then he looked back at Keisha. "You lied to me." Keisha's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't lie because I wanted to hurt you. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that if you knew I was rich, you'd stop loving me." Nelson remained silent. Keisha removed the simple scarf from her head. "I'm sorry." Then she walked toward the car. But before she could enter, Nelson called her name. Keisha. She turned around. Nelson walked toward her. I was angry because you didn't trust me. Keisha lowered her head. But I finally understand why. He smiled through his tears. You wanted someone to love you for who you were. Keisha nodded. Nelson took her hand. I already did. Months later, Keisha returned to the community. But this time, she didn't come as a food seller. She came as the owner of a foundation. She built a school. She opened a small hospital. She created jobs for struggling families. And the first person she hired was Nelson. Not because he loved her, but because he had proven that even when he had nothing, he still had a good heart. Years later, people would ask Keisha, why did a billionaire heiress choose a poor graduate? She always gave the same answer. Because when I had nothing, he saw me. Then she would smile and say, money showed me who wanted me. But poverty showed me who truly loved me. And that was the greatest gift her father had ever left her.